Hey there, this is Celia. I'm going to continue on with my Lyme story. In this video, I'm going to talk about a time when I had relapsing fevers. Sometimes I call them intermittent fevers. I'm not really sure what the technical term is, but in any case, I had a repeating fever pattern that I understand is often common with Lyme and the co-infections, but it could have been from other reasons. I'm not really sure. But in any case, it was part of my Lyme story, so I'm including it here. Okay, so I'm going to pick up where I left off in the last video. So at the beginning of this time, I was 24, and I started working with kids. And as is common for adults that work with kids, I started to get illnesses that I have not had for a long time. In fact, some of them I never had myself as a kid. So now these aren't necessarily part of the Lyme picture per se, but I bring them up because my immune system was really thrown for a loop having to encounter all of these kind of new to it or haven't seen for a really long time type of illnesses. In my day job, I say that in air quotes because I'm actually not able to work right now because of the Lyme, basically, but specifically I have neuropathy in my upper limb, so I can't use my hands. Also, I don't have childcare. That's part of it. But still, I try to learn and keep up with things as an acupuncturist and a clinical herbalist. And one thing that I've been reading and learning about is some of the more specifics about COVID. And one thing that people find, researchers find, whatever, about COVID is that if somebody's white blood cell count is lower than normal for them, they're more likely to contract COVID. So this is not rocket science. It's basically saying that when people's immune system, which is your white blood cells, is not at it's as strong as it normally is for you, then yeah, you're more likely to pick up things, of course. Now, in the beginning of COVID, it didn't really matter how strong your white blood cell count was, but now in 2022, the variants are more leading people to get it when they're more taxed immunologically, where in the beginning of COVID it was anybody could get it because it was brand new. Does that make sense? Okay. So that's kind of what was going on with me. My immune system was working really hard, and I think that kind of set me up for this period of intermittent or relapsing fevers. So in January, I got this really wicked respiratory infection. This has been the worst respiratory infection I've ever had in my life. And I've had pneumonia 5 or 6 times, and this was worse than that. It wasn't as dire or scary, but my lungs really hurt, and I was in bed, completely on bed rest, just feeling awful for 5 days. And then, again, it had nothing to do with Lyme because my husband got it the next week, and he was in bed for 5 days. But it was just rough to deal with, and it put a lot of taxation on my body. It really taxed my body because my lungs are one of my weak spots. All right. And then a couple months later, I switched my job. I worked at an after-school program, and then I started to work at a preschool that had 18 months to 5-year-olds. And there I was exposed to some of those weird new things. So I had pink eye, which isn't really a huge deal, but still, it's something different. Actually, I had it twice, and I had colds and flus that were a little weird, and I had hand, foot, and mouth disease, which I could be wrong, but I think it's parvovirus. If I'm wrong, I'll write it in the description. So with the parvovirus or hand, foot, and mouth came some skin issues. So I had this weird breakout on my face, neck, chest, and upper body of this kind of purplish red rash. It was not raised. It was not particularly itchy, but it was hot and very uncomfortable. I mean, it was a little itchy. I didn't want to like scratch it like an itch. It was just like I wanted pressure on it and coolness, and like it was hard to be in my skin. Now, I didn't go get tested for parvovirus, but the kids at the school had hand, foot, and mouth, and I had other symptoms, and I had the skin stuff, and it did start on my hands. I did not have the mouth sores that often come with it. So that was my best guess. I've never had anything quite like that. And then a couple weeks later, I got what I call the stomach flu. Now, there probably is a better, more technical term for it, but I think you know what I mean. Basically, I just was throwing up, nauseous, and incredible malaise. So achy, feverish, chills, just felt awful. And I had that pretty intense for 48 hours. I lived in the bathroom. It was rough, you know, and then it took me about a day to get kind of over that, where I could eat again and kind of regain my health. So that happened on a Friday night. I came home from work. I think I ate dinner, and then between dinner and bedtime, maybe like 8 p.m. or something, I just was overcame with the stomach flu, essentially. So yeah, that is what I thought was just the stomach flu. I had it one time. People in the preschool get it, little kids get it, you know, I figured that's where it came from. And that was kind of normal. And at this time I'd be getting a lot of colds and flus and things, so I was like, of course I got it. It's going around. I'm going to get it. Well, 3 weeks later, I came home from work on a Friday night. I had dinner. And again, I came down with what I thought was the stomach flu. Now, this time I only threw up 2 times. So I threw up once. I was like, oh no, here we go again. And then I did it a second time. And then all the nausea and vomiting kind of dwindled. It was not the main concern. So my nausea and vomiting went down. But I had all the other symptoms, and they all went up. So I was much more achy, like painfully achy in my spine, pelvis, low back, and femur, the thighs. Just my bones felt like just, so achy. Couldn't relax, couldn't get comfortable. And then I had more chills and like shivering, shaking. My teeth were chattering in my mouth. And then more intense fevers. And it would just kind of go on and off. So sometimes I would be feverish, and then sometimes I would be cold and achy and chilled. And that is how it went. And the bone aches were there the whole time. And again, this lasted for 48 hours and a whole nother day until I could kind of get back on my feet and like be able to walk around and like get dressed and feed myself and like drink water. And I had not been able to do any of that. And I was really, really drained. My fever was not terribly high. I don't tend to get super high fevers. I don't think my immune system is that strong. Like, I don't think I could run 104 fever if, you know, my life depended on it, literally. I don't even remember what my fever was, but it wasn't alarming, scary. It was just a lot for me. It was over 100 for sure. Yeah, I'm not even going to guess that to what it was, but, you know, it was higher than the 3 weeks before. Okay, so then 3 weeks went by, and I came home from on a Friday night after work, went about my business, and sure enough, in the evening, once again, I came down with this incredible, just whoosh, this like malaise entered into my body, and I had a much higher fever, much more shakes, shivers, and freezing coldness, almost to the level of convulsing, but not convulsing. It's not legitimate seizures, but it was, you know, just scary for me, and much more intense bone aches. Now this lasted again for 48 hours, the same exact pattern. And it was really, really, really intense because it felt like my bones were literally being crushed. Like my spine, my legs in particular, and my pelvic bones, like the sacrum. Oh my God, it just hurt so much. And I didn't really know that I could be that much in pain. I just didn't. It was like the new level of what was possible for me. All right, so again, it resolved. Took me a day to kind of acclimate. And yeah, then I could go about back to work and everything. And I was really, really drained again because the pain was just like so hard. It was almost like being put through the ringer, like literally. It just really discombobulated me. And it was hard to be in my body and kind of cope with that. I started to have kind of like a PTSD level of like, what is happening to me? This kind of out of control fear come in. So eventually I started to feel better, but afterwards I was even more drained than the other two times. Okay. And you guessed it, one last time I came home from work on Friday and got sick again, and this time everything was even more intense. So I had a higher fever, more sweating, longer periods of chills with more convulsing. My teeth were chattering. I thought I was going to break them off, and then my bones were so achy. I just didn't know what I was going to do to cope. It was so uncomfortable. And that luckily was the last time that it happened. So that was the intermittent fevers or relapsing fevers that I had. Now I've had periods of relapsing fevers, but never to this level of being so exact on the same exact day, 3 weeks apart, and each time lasting exactly 48 hours and with the same symptoms. So this one, to me, in my mind, is pretty marked as an odd experience for me. Okay, so before the relapsing fevers started, I said I had hand, foot, and mouth, and I had this weird rash. I'm going to put pictures in here of what the rash looked like. One of the 3 times that I had this rash situation, I took pictures. I think these pictures are the first time that I had it. So you can see that it's red and raised. Okay, so this happened before getting the fevers, and it happened one time in the middle of the fevers. I can't remember where exactly, but I came home one day. Oh, you know what? I didn't have to work. It was like spring break or something. And of course, during spring break, you get sick. So I had this last for a couple days during that time. It happened one afternoon, and then the next afternoon it had resolved. And during that time, the second time of getting the rash, I had a malar rash, which is often associated with lupus, which I'll talk about in a second. So it was a rash on my nose and across the bridge of my nose and like underneath my eyes on my cheekbones. And then I had it a third time. I think it was after all the fevers had stopped. Okay, so there's 3 times of getting those rashes. So that's another layer to the story. If you ever worked in childcare or as a preschool teacher, they hate it when people are sick because if there aren't enough adults there, enough staff there, then some kids might not be able to go if your numbers aren't right, or like there isn't enough to cover your breaks, and it just kind of makes everything more challenging. So my boss was a weird one in general, and she was like, you need to have a doctor's note anytime you're sick. And I'm like, why? Like, I don't want to go to the doctor when I'm sick. Second of all, I didn't have insurance at this time, so I didn't want to pay for this out of pocket. And I had already been through like being really enmeshed within going to the doctor a lot in my past. Like in high school, I went to the doctor like almost every month because I always had something wrong with me. And then in college, I lost my insurance, so I stopped doing that. And I had other resources to help me with my health, which was nice. You know, it just was like, I'm not going to go. Like, they can't do anything for me. This is dumb, you know. But she was saying that, and eventually I was like, fuck it, fine, I'll go. So what happened is I had a sore throat, really, really bad sore throat. And I was like, I can't go to work. It's awful. I don't want to spread it, whatever. And she was like, you have to go to the doctor and get a note that it's strep in order to be excused from work. And it's dumb, so dumb, because I had been to the doctor probably 15 times before I was halfway through college, in middle school and high school and early college, testing to see if my very, very bad sore throat was indeed strep, and it never, ever was strep. Now, when I was 19, I did have mono, so that, of course, it kind of equates for some of the infected throat experience that I had, but I mean, it could be another sort of bacteria that isn't strep but similar, that doesn't show up on a test. Could have been a virus, and of course it could have been Lyme and the co-infections as well. So I just thought that was totally ridiculous and dumb for me to pay probably $300 out of cash to go get this test. But anyways, I don't know what got into me, but I was like, fine, I'll do it. And I went in, and of course it was not strep, okay? But before we even got to the testing part, the doctor asked me, like, what's going on? How do you feel? And then they started to ask me questions like, have you had any fevers? And I'm like, yeah, I have. And I explained the 3-week, 4 repeating cycle of having fevers, chills, incredible intense bone aches, and also the rashes came up. And guess what? The malar rash came up, and they said immediately, oh, we need to test you for lupus right now. So I went and got tested, and I waited a couple of days to get the results. And they called me on the phone, and they said, we feel pretty certain that you have lupus. You need to come in and get another test. We messed up the test. We're going to give you another one for free. Now, part of me was like, when does the medical community ever give you anything for free? Even if it's their mistake, okay? Particularly in the US. Maybe it's different elsewhere in the world. But our medical system has a lot of mistakes, and they do not fess up to it or offer anything free. So I was like, whoa, they're serious. But, you know, secondly, maybe they were being nice. Maybe because they knew I didn't have insurance. I wonder if that's a possibility. There are kind-hearted people out there in the world, in the medical community, so perhaps that was also part of it. But in any case, I went in and got tested again, and it was negative. They also tested me for rheumatoid arthritis. I can't remember exactly what the markers were in 2007 when I was getting tested. Definitely was tested for the ANA, anti-nuclear antibodies, which was negative. But I think there might have been another thing particular for rheumatoid arthritis. It was negative. So that was that. I was sent home, and they told me to come in and get tested every 6 months because it can take a while for the antibodies to come and show themselves. So here's the thing. I went home and I thought about this. Now, let me just say that this is just my own subjective experience. Okay? Like, it's always important to rule things out. In fact, I am going to pursue ruling out MS very soon. As soon as I get new insurance. My husband has had 3 different jobs this year. It's June 2022. Since January, he's had 3 different jobs, and he was unemployed for 2 months. So we have had 4 different insurances. Luckily, we have it, but I've been waiting to use it because it's not really the right one at the right time. It's important to rule things out, okay? Like, it's okay to have lupus or rheumatoid arthritis or ALS or whatever and Lyme. It's not that you can only have one. I came home from that interaction with the doctor. I kind of checked in with myself and my body, and it was interesting what came up. So, a autoimmune condition is your body is essentially attacking itself. And I just didn't feel like that what my issue was. Now, can you just sense what's happening with your body and be accurate about it all the time? No. I'm not going to say that I'm the authority about that. Like, what do I know? But this was just the intuitive hunch that I got, so take it with a grain of salt. But what I did feel is that something was attacking me that was not me. Like, there's something that shouldn't be there that is causing these sort of things. And in the back of my mind, I thought maybe it's like heavy metals or maybe parasites or mold, that sort of pathogen from the outside. I didn't necessarily think it was Lyme or the co-infections. I had no clue. Okay, so I just want to say that, and I could sense that I would be on a hamster wheel if I continued to chase a lupus or rheumatoid arthritis diagnosis. I would have symptoms, I would go in, I would get tested, and it would be negative, and they'd be like, I don't really know. I'm like, well, okay, now I'm out $500 again. Like, it's okay if you do that. It's okay if I do that. But at that time, it didn't seem like the right thing for me. So I kind of got off the hamster wheel, and I did not pursue that anymore. Basically, the end of this story here. I just want to finish with a couple things that I found out about myself during this time. Like, when I look back at this time, what stands out the most to me is that having that really, really intense bone pain that was repeating kind of brought me to this other level of really, really not wanting to be with this intense pain and suffering that I was experiencing, but kind of choosing to be with it. I don't want to say that I embraced the pain because I really didn't have a choice, but in a very, very, very weird and roundabout way, it brought me a little bit deeper into my body. Like, for the first time, I was paying attention to like what is happening to my bones, my femurs, and the immune ecological things that are happening in there. It was an interesting kind of relationship I made with my body during that time. And I think, again, I was kind of forced to because I couldn't run from the pain. Nothing worked for it. Okay, actually, two things did work, and I'll have to do another video that's more educational or factual than this one. But I just want to bring them up because I owe them a world of gratitude. And one product that I used was called oscillococcinum. I used to work at this co-op, which is basically a natural food store. And they would have a box of like old products, expired things that were returned, things that were damaged, samples from companies, whatever. And in there was oscillococcinum. It was a homeopathic remedy, and it's for fevers, aches, chills, pains. More for the flu, not really for the cold. Not really for colds, it's for flus. Specific for the fevers, chills, aches, and pains. That's what it's for. And so I brought it home, and I used it during this time, and it really, 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 really did help me. And I've used other homeopathics in the past and kind of in the near future, and I've never fell in love with them, and they often didn't work for me. But this is basically the only homeopathic that I stand by all the time. Even my husband is like, I need that. When he had COVID, he was going crazy with that. Okay, second of all, I used bone set tea. And bone set tea is amazing for like the immunity in general. I mean, it's more specific than that, but it helps with like that initial immune response, and it is specific for relieving pain in the bones. I mean, it's called bone set. There was a type of flu going around probably in the 1800s, I'm not sure when, and it was called breakbone fever. And the main symptom was that your bones felt like they were breaking because you were so achy, and bone set was the number one choice at that time. This was a long time ago when there weren't so many pharmaceuticals, and it was all the pharmacopoeia was herbs and natural substances. So that is what I use it for, and it was very, very helpful. So I look back in this time and I see like these two remedies were just like there. Particularly the bone set was like, I am here, I'm going to anchor you in here, and I got you. So I'm forever grateful for that. Is there anything else I want to say? Sorry, I got to look at my notes. Yeah, okay. One more thing before I go. Like I said, this kind of brought me into a deeper relationship with my body. I didn't see it at that time, but as much as I absolutely kind of despise the thought of illness being a teacher, I don't like it because it causes so much suffering, and I feel like a lot of the suffering is preventable. Not all suffering is preventable, and not all illness is preventable, because we're humans and that's part of what we have to go through, I guess, on living here. So I wouldn't say that illness was an initiation per se. I think that's a little bit too romanticizing for my taste at this point. But I would say that illness was a teacher for me. And then another way to say it practically is that I had to learn how to respond to what was happening with the limited capabilities that I had. And, I couldn't cure it. I couldn't stop it, but I did the best that I could. And in the end, I was like, hey, I got through that. And I was very, very grateful that it only lasted 4 times. Okay, thanks for listening. I'll talk to you in the next video. Bye.